The Johnny Be Good hat is made with multiple strands of yarn held together as one. I am making the adult large hat, so I have 4 strands of yarn here, and there are actually, they're all Lion Brand Heartland. 3 of them are connected to a solid skein of yarn, solid color skein of yarn, and then one of these is actually a magic yarn ball, which is just various colors of the Lion Brand yarn that have been joined together with a magic knot to make a multicolor little ball of yarn, and that's what's giving me this fun little variation in color. I have tons of partial skeins of Lion Brand Heartland because it's one of my favorite yarns. So what I'll do is if I run out of one of the solid color skeins, I'll just replace it maybe with the same color, maybe with a different color, whatever I feel like. It's kind of a fun color changing little pattern here. So to make this hat, it's just a repeat of the same rows over and over again. So even if I had just cast on, this would be my first row. And every time I repeat, this is the row that I start with. So I'm going to start with a knit front and back. So we just knit front, like a regular knit, but don't pull the stitch off, and then you go ahead and knit in the back. So a knit front and back. Make sure, since you're using multiple strands of yarn, you've caught every single strand when you do that. Okay, and now we're just going to knit until there are only 3 stitches left on our left hand or non-dominant hand needle. Okay, so we're just going to knit across. And when you're working with multiple strands held together as one, that's exactly what you do. You hold them together as one. This bundle of 4 strands of yarn count as one piece, and that's how we're treating them. We're almost down to just 3 stitches left, so I'm going to keep on going. And there are 3 stitches left. You see that? So now I'm just going to stop and I'm going to turn my work. Okay, so I'm just spinning it around, making sure the yarn is in the back again, because that is how we knit, with the yarn in back. And now that I've turned, I'm just going to knit all the way back to the beginning again. I'm not doing anything fancy with that turn. If I just, it was right here, okay, when I ended, and then all you do is turn it around and then move the yarn from the front to the back. Make sure you don't go over the top, because that'll add a wrap over your yarn. So I just move it onto the back in a way that doesn't add an extra loop. Okay, and now I'm just going to knit my way back, all the way back to the other end. Okay, we're getting to the end here. We're not going to do anything fancy, we're just knitting all the way to the end. Okay, and now we're going to turn our work. There we go, we've turned, and we're going to take a look, move that, what we did here, and you can see here are the 3 stitches I did not work, and there's this little step right here. So the next row we're going to knit front and back, and then we're going to stop 3 stitches before the step. Okay, so we'll end up creating a new step. So let's show you that as I launch my knitting needle. Okay, so again, we start with a knit front and back. There we go. And now we're going to knit until 3 stitches before that step. We're getting close. It's really easy to see where the step is. See how there's that big space on our needles? It just kind of happens naturally there. So it's really easy to tell where that step is. Alright, now I have 3 stitches before the step left. 1, 2, 3, and then there's the step. Now I'm just going to turn my work, get the yarn behind my needle again, making sure not to go over top of it. Go behind it. And then I'm going to knit all the way back again. Okay, so I am finishing up this row. Let's get that done here. Alright, and then we're going to turn our work and repeat those 2 rows again. We will knit front and back, and then knit until 3 stitches before the very first step that we come upon. So it will stop right here, and then turn it all the way back to the beginning again. And we're going to repeat that until we've finished those rows that have us knitting up to 3 stitches before the step, and then knit back. And then we'll get to the row that has us knitting all the way through this section. So I will come back here and show you that row and how we do our little knit twos together that actually pull these little steps together, so that it helps us create our curve, and it also makes it so we don't have any holes. I've completed all my short rows, and now I'm going to go ahead and knit back. And for this row, we knit front and back. And now I'm going to knit until 1 stitch before the very first step that I come to. So I'm just going to keep on knitting until 1 stitch before the first step. You can see here's the first step right here. You can just see that pretty easily. So I'm going to knit to right here. Here we are, 1 stitch before the first step. So now what I'm going to do is knit 2 together. So I am going to knit through this stitch and this stitch. I'm going through both of them, yarn over, pull through. There we go. I knit 2 together, and then I'm going to knit 1. Now you can see I have 1 stitch and then another step. I'm going to knit 2 together again. See, that first one was super easy, just to give me a false sense of security. Okay, knit 2 together, and then knit 1. And I'm going to repeat that until there's just 2 stitches left. So knit 2 together, and then knit 1, knit 2 together. Make sure you're not doing the knit 2 togethers too loose. When you're done, if you want to give that yarn a little tug at the end of your knit 2 together, you want to make sure it's not loose, or else you will end up with that little hole. And yeah, I did the knit 2 together, so now this is a knit 1, knit 2 together, knit 1, and now there's just actually the 1 stitch left. So 2 stitches after the last knit 2 together, we knit 1, and now there's 1 stitch left. So I'm going to knit that very last stitch, and now I'm going to actually turn my work again. And for this row, I'm going to knit 2 together, because we did end up giving ourselves an extra stitch through all of that. There we go. And then just knit the rest of the way back, and then I will start my repeat rows over again and keep doing that until I have this straight section down here will be the length that I want to become the diameter of the hat. Not the diameter, the circumference, sorry. The length from my cast on edge to here should become the circumference of the hat. Okay, so I have completed those 12 rows, a total of 6 times, and my hat along this bottom edge currently measures, I think, about 22 inches. Yeah, it's like, oops, sorry, I guess you can't see the end there. So yeah, it currently measures about 22 inches. So it can easily pull to 24, which is what I want for an adult male. All right, so I'm good with that, and that means it's time to finish this hat off. Now, like I said, I repeated those 12 rows 6 times. I kind of lied. I actually repeated it 5 times, and then rows 1 through 11 once more. So I didn't repeat the last row. Now you have 2 choices. You can either bind off and seam the bind off edge to the cast on edge and also close up the top, or you can not bind off and you can graft this edge to the cast on edge and still need to close up the top. I am simply going to bind off. Okay, so since normally on row 12 we start with a knit 2 together, I am going to start my bind off that way. I'm going to knit 2 together. Okay, then I'm going to knit 1, and then I'm going to pass that first stitch over. And now I'm going to continue my bind off where I knit 1 loosely, pass the last stitch over. Knit 1 loosely, pass the last stitch over. And just keep doing that until there are no stitches left on your left hand or non-dominant needle and 1 stitch left on your right or dominant needle. I've finished my bind off and there's just this 1 stitch left. What I'm going to do is just clip 2 of these threads with only a few inches. I'm only clipping 2 of these threads with just a few inches of tail. And then I'm going to pull off about a yard of the other 2. Maybe a little more, I don't know, just plenty to do the seam. And cut that, okay? Toss that out of the way. And then I'm just going to pull my needle to pull all of these ends through. Okay, there we go. And then get the needle out of the way. Now I'm going to leave these 2 pieces that I cut shorter to weave in a bit, but I'm going to go ahead and thread these 2 ends onto my yarn needle. Make sure that they're pretty even. There we go. Yeah, it looks like when I was pulling them out, I made one longer than the other. So there we go. Oop, even them up a bit. All right. Okay. Now I need to seam this together. Now I also have all of this from my cast on, so I could have used one of these ends, but I'm not going to. It's kind of easier to seam together if you fold both sides. You see this? Here we go. That's how we're going to seam together. So I have this threaded up, and what I'm going to try to do is just neatly seam from a bump to a bump. And I'm actually kind of going right through the center of each bump. Okay, so I went from the center of the bump on the bind off side, oopsie, to the center of the first bump on the cast on side. And now I'm actually just going to go ahead and wrap that. And actually, I think I'm just going to catch a tiny bit at the very bottom of the cast on side, tiny bit on the very bottom of the bind off side, pull it through again. I just want to make a little extra added seamy bit here, and then back through the first bump. I'm just going to call this going through the first bump towards me, first set of bumps towards me. Okay, now next set of bumps. Okay, here we're using these bumps here and these bumps here, so next set of bumps away from me. Okay, next set of bumps towards me, next set away from me. I'm going to keep doing this till I get all the way through that seam and up to the top where, oopsie, where I need to deal with a little hole that will be at the top. You see, I'm having to kind of adjust things in order to be able to get to the rest of this seam neatly. We're getting very close to the top here. Just gonna keep on going. It's okay if you have to kind of do a little guesswork at the end. Life will go on. Okay, so now I've got this kind of top bit going on here. Alright, we still got maybe like 2 more stitches that need to be seamed together here. before we get to that little opening. Okay, I think I can go through all of this and all of this. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is actually kind of go through just these little bumps across the top of each of these stitches at this opening. Okay, I'm going through all those little bumps, and then I'm going to pull that tight. Okay, now I'm going to look at my seam, and I'm going to look at it on this side and see how it looks, and then I'm going to turn it the other way and look on it at the other side and see how it looks. And I'm going to say I actually like this side better. I like the seam on this side better, so that means this side is going to be my right side. So you just look at your seam and see which side looks best, okay? You want to definitely make sure that the seam on the bottom couple of inches looks reasonable on both sides, so that if it's folded up, it doesn't look messy, right? But I like the seam on both sides. I think I just like it a little more on this side. So I'm going to flip this again so that it's back to inside out. And now that I have it back to inside out, this is the side where I'm going to weave in this top piece of thread. If I had decided that this side was prettier, I would have just pushed the thread through to the other side, the yarn through to the other side, and woven it in over there. Now, once we do this, you're going to need to weave in all of the other ends, okay? And you need to take care when you're weaving in all of those other ends, because they're all going to be at the bottom of the hat, where the hat may or may not be folded up depending on the wearer. Okay, so I tend to take a piece that's coming from this direction and weave it in this way, and a piece that's coming from this direction and weave them in this way. I'll still actually end up weaving them in probably up and down, but I'm going to go over a little bit first just to kind of help seal up that seam. With this particular pattern, I feel perfectly comfortable weaving in two pieces of yarn at a time. So I'm actually going to kind of, let's see, come back a little bit through just some of this, I think. Here, we'll go like this way here. Want to follow, here we go. I want to follow the stitches that are already there. So I'm going to just kind of mirror these stitches for a little bit. Sometimes you just have to kind of pull and push a bit to see if you can find the stitches, but I found them, and now I'm going to mirror them for a little bit. It keeps everything, it kind of hides that bind in really well, okay? And because you're doing so much back and forth and up and down and all of that, it keeps it pretty secure. So now that I've done that, what I usually will then do is kind of poke it through the center bits of this section here so that it's really kind of in there, and then give it a little clip. Okay, so now those two ends are woven in. There are 4 ends on this side, so what I'm going to do is divide it into 2 and 2 again, and I'll weave 2 coming up through these stitches and 2 coming up through these stitches, and that way everything is kind of you know, evened out, spread out a little bit, so that there's not any like majorly bulky parts from all this weaving in of stuff. Now I am going to kind of come up here on this side to about here, because I still want to fix this bump a little bit. So, oopsie, there we go. It looks like I made that tail too long. All right, and then come back in through here. There we go. There, and then in through here. There we go. And now I will start following the stitches on this little section here. There we go. Like I said, sometimes you have to kind of pull things apart to really see, because it almost looks like the stitches go here, but they don't. They actually go underneath there. So here, I'll show you that again. Oops. Did I skip something? Yes, I did. Okay, so it comes up here, down here, and now it would be really easy to think that they went all the way over to here, but if you look, you can see they actually come this way and underneath these two. So you just kind of have to follow where that yarn is going and just make these little duplicate stitches. Go to little ways to weave in these ends. Okay, I feel good about that, so I'm just going to kind of run this through the center of all of these this way for a bit. There we go. And give it a clip. Okay, and then I have these two ends still. So many ends when you're using multiple pieces of yarn. All right, so these two ends, I'm just going to kind of bring it up here and run it through all of that to get it over to this little section of stitches. And now I'm going to duplicate some of these stitches to weave in this end. All right, so now this is the inside of my hat. All right, there we go, and then I can flip it. All right, so here is my hat, right side out. And then if the wearer wants to fold up the brim any, they certainly can. All right, so there you go. If you wanted your hat to be longer, all you would have needed to do was start with a longer cast on, and then you do the rest of the pattern the same way. Okay, so your first short row starts at 3 stitches away from the end, and then they keep on going 3 stitches away from the last short row, and so that'll get your top correct, because all of the extra stitches you add on, you're adding onto the bottom, which doesn't have any shaping. All of this part is straight. So right now, this hat, let's see, it's measuring about 22 inches around and about 9.5 inches deep. Okay, so there you go. Happy hatting.